this is going to be a little different. This last month I have been working on a map a day to bring one of my favorite all-time games for the Nintendo 64, Star Wars Rogue Squadron, into my new favorite VR game, VTOL VR. And this is sort of the process that I've taken in order to bring Rogue Squadron into VR as best as I can with the help from the community and things like that. The biggest sort of step that made me push into doing this, it was kind of in the back of my mind, and then I saw this page from SATD.SK, a gentleman who made a bunch of tools to get into the PC release of Rogue Squadron. And he published his tools on GitHub, including ways to receive the map data and height maps directly out of the game itself. So considering we were going to be able to be as accurate as possible, I said, well, if this person did all the work to be able to pull the map data out of the game itself, I might as well do something with it. So thankfully everything was on his ReRogue GitHub page, and with a little bit of help reading the documentation there and sort of fumbling through it, I was able to use the tools in order to pull the map data out of my good old games copy of Rogue Squadron 3D, and then I was able to unpack it onto my local drive on my computer. And now I've got all of the game files unpacked. Some of them are readable, some of them are not. It's still a work in progress, but the important thing was the maps. We were able to find a lot of the background music online. The entire OST was available, and one of our other VTOL users was able to figure out which missions used which files for the music as each one went along. And then we were able to record the other audio from gameplay footage itself, either by watching it or playing it directly through the PC release. And here I am in Blender, opening up the file, and we used a tutorial to make a height map, exported the height map, and then imported that into Photoshop in order to create something that VTOL would natively support. And you can import that directly into the VTOL map creation software, and it looks a little something like this. So we select our height map after we edit it in Photoshop, and it does take a bit of massaging in order to edit that to where it has the correct size hills and valleys. You want to set your max and minimum heights. If you don't want water on the map, you make sure and have it above 0. And then we save it with the same name as it had when it was the original N64 game. In this case, level H. And we'll see what it looks like. And in first, it usually takes a couple tries. Very rarely is the height map perfect for VTOL. In this case, everything was a little bit too contrasted. See, there's a big lake there that shouldn't be. And otherwise, it did a pretty good job importing the map directly from the Rogue Squadron files directly. And we just need to massage this down and make it to where it's not so low in the valleys and maintain the rest of the definition of the map. So we'll go ahead and do what we can in Photoshop in order to sort of cut around or manipulate the file to basically reduce its height and contrast in order to for VTOL to make it look like it did in the original game. So once we have it how we like, whether it's not too high or not too low, usually by editing it in Photoshop a little bit, adjusting its brightness levels, adjusting its contrast, we get to where we want and we're happy with it, we go ahead and save it, and then we can start placing our buildings. In here we're placing our airbase. This gives me a sense of scale for the map so I can understand how long it'll take for somebody to get from one place to another. We're using about a 46-kilometer map here so that it doesn't take forever to get places. These missions in the original game were only about 5 to 10 minutes long, and so we're just scaling it up. Once the map is completed and I've got all the buildings, or at least a couple of the buildings down, I go ahead and cut the footage that we took from playing the game into Photoshop. So here I am, I had to record a failure into Premiere, And so I take that and I throw it in there, and I take just the section I need to get the audio and video clips directly out of the game so that we can have the cutscenes into the game. So here I am just scrubbing through it and then exporting that to where we can use that later. I do have to do the same thing with the audio. So I have to do them separately too, because the audio clip would play over the background music, and we want it to play over the radio in game. And then I'll go ahead and save it into the same projects folder as the rest of the game, along with the thumbnails and other video and audio files from that. Then we go back into the map, and after watching and cutting through all of the video footage, I have a really good idea of how the map's supposed to be ran. Watching that really helps get my mind in the same space to recreate what I just watched in the recording. So I am placing down, in this case, buildings, 5 buildings here, BD Marts, that are going to be turned into AT-AT walkers. Now, this game doesn't allow clipping of buildings in the map editor, so in order to make something that looks like a walker, what we've done is we've taken grain silos and figured out exactly how to position them in a way where they can clip together into legs, and then a building on top that represents the body, and then a silo coming out for the neck. And that allows us to put a tank and a bunker in the front for the head, so it'll actually shoot at targets. So here I am going through, grabbing the original X, Y, and Z of the BD Mart, and then our custom Excel file will go ahead and spit out the X, Y, and Z coordinates for the limbs and torso of the AT-AT, and I simply replace them in here, and then replace these tabs with commas, and then you get something that looks a little bit like an AT-AT. Let's see if that works. Go ahead and double click on it. I see a foot here, and there's the body and neck of our AT-AT. So that's everything that's static. Obviously it can't move, but it's definitely a start, and it gives people something to fly through the legs of in order to complete objectives. That gives them the feeling like they're fighting walkers, and they will eventually shoot back. Now that we've got all that audio data, though, from all the clips, we need to normalize the audio so that we're not blowing people's ears out. VTOL VR's radio seems to be on the high end, and I found the secret spot for radio sounds to be right around 68 decibels. So I'm using a program called MP3 Gain to normalize all of the files down to 68, give or take, decibels here. And that'll keep everything level as far as making sure that people all have the same experience. And then I can go in and create the briefing room audio. So we've got all the briefing rooms from the game, as well as the background audio for the briefing room. We will find the briefing audio from the level that we're looking for, in which case this is the Hoth clip, and we'll copy that to the front of the lobby audio, and then save that into our project folder as well. And that'll sound a little something like this.
Experience the Battle of Hoth from the cockpit of your snowspeeder as you hold off Imperial forces and help the rebel transports escape.
Okay, now that we've got our AT-ATs in there, our buildings are in the map, we can go into our mission editor. So we're importing the map into our mission, and what we're going to be doing is setting up our player. We have, in this map specifically, the snowspeeder. For that in-game aircraft, we use the V-42, and we give it specific guns that do not make it so overpowered that it wouldn't be a good analog for the snowspeeder. So we're giving it the 2 different guns, the GAU-8 as well as the chain gun, the Hydra 7 rocket pods for heavy blasters, the CBU-97s, more just for anti-personnel, but also so that you can have something in those slots on the aircraft, as well as ARST heat seeker missiles for TIE fighters as well as probe droids. So with that, this file here that we're looking at tells me exactly which aircraft gets what weapons. So that campaign-wide, we stick to it like a Bible, basically. This is what guns you're going to get. If you're flying a Y-Wing, you know you're going to get this, 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 and this. If you're flying a speeder, you know you're going to get these few things, etc., etc., etc. And that's how we differentiate plane from plane. So we'll go ahead and check those boxes, and then we'll copy this aircraft over 14 times into their spawning spots, and that's the 14 spawns. Then we can start adding in our other units, our UCAVs, the enemy aircraft, the AT-AT heads and guns. And once that's all set up, I'll start going ahead and putting in the video files. Now, here's the trick about video files. And thanks to Spawn at the VTOL VR Discord for finding out about this. There are video files in the tutorial, which means that the game has the ability to play video files in your HUD. However, it's not something that you can just do. So I set up a list of timed events, like our intro, our outro, when you find an AT-AT, anytime that there was a cutscene that I had grabbed previously and edited with Premiere, as we saw at the beginning. Then I save the file, close VTOL VR, and go ahead and go into the editor. Now, before I closed it, a couple quick things that I did while making these groups. I put a MP3 file, the one that was the audio for that video folder, or file rather, as well as a text box that we're going to be replacing with the video file. And the text is also, I'm going to put the time of how long the video should be running in that text field as well, so that now we can edit those text fields out and replace them with our video file. We'll just go ahead and put in all of those video and audio messages. Once that's all done and all of our timed events are finished, we'll go ahead and close VTOL VR like I mentioned, go into the editor, and then edit in all of the data with Notepad++ with replacing the text with video. So here we are, we're cutting our event target out and replacing it from text to video with text. And we're using the same duration value, and we're using the same name as our MP3, because that's how we know which video goes with which audio, except the extension is different, MP3 versus MP4. So we'll then, once we have all that changed in our sample video.txt, I'll find the event target that it was to replace, which in this case was the text-only event target, and we'll replace it there. And we'll do that every time that there was supposed to be a background video clip. And so in this case, it's 4 or 5 times, once for the intro, outro, ATST cutscenes, etc. Now we're into the importing of the video clips. So we'll go ahead and take a look at our intro here. We've got how long it is, the text that we had from the text box we replaced, we copied it in before we replaced it, as well as the video. However, this video, just because it says intro.mp4, won't play until you tell it where intro.mp4 actually resides, so it will pull it into the folder. So we've got to do that for every audio and video file, regardless if we did it in text or not. So I'm going to do that for every one of these timed events. And then we can start adding in all of our enemies. So here is one of those AT-ATs we created earlier, and what I'm doing is I'm placing the bunker as its head, and this is something where it will be destroyed once they complete an objective, and I'm kind of angling it so it can be facing towards its target, giving it a little bit more liveliness because it is a static object. And then we'll go ahead and clip a tank in there so it can, if a friendly unit gets a little too close, it's not just being shot at with the bunker cannons, it's also got a 50 cal as well as a main battle tank cannon. And we'll apply a name to it so that we can destroy it when people complete the objective to destroy that target, namely fly through the legs. And we'll just do that to all of them. There have to be triggers involved with every single one of these targets, but also anytime a player dies in the original N64 game, you heard a specific death animation sound. And what we've done is we've taken 7 of those sounds and applied each one twice for the 14 player deaths. So the first time any of the 14 players die, you'll hear one of those sounds. And that kind of gives you a little bit more feel from the original game, because you did hear those sounds quite often from not only the player you're playing, if you got a mission over or you lost a life, but also from the other units in the game, the AI controlled units. You would hear them crash and say things like,
help me out here. What are you doing back there? I've lost R2. I'm sure, but my timer is down.
Things of that nature. And then once they fly through the legs, we're going to make it to where there's a big explosion of a building underneath their feet, and we'll set that building into the ground and hide it until it's needed, and then it'll explode once the player completes that objective. Put in our scenario info and briefing, copying these directly from Wikipedia so I can get everything spelled correctly, adding our briefing. Our briefings include the exact script taken from the game, copied from Wikipedia, as well as our custom-made and written introductions to the aircraft, because people are going to expect them to be an F-26 or an F-42, but in reality they're an X-Wing, an A-Wing, a Y-Wing. So we're also explaining what their mission objectives are, as well as how to defeat certain high-priority targets, like in this case AT-ATs. You have to fly through the legs. You can't kill them with anything that the snowspeeder has, because they are bunkers which cannot be destroyed with cluster bombs. And the other briefing notes are information about the game itself, our other maps that people that enjoyed this might be interested, like our pod racing maps, as well as a little bit of information about myself if people want to get a hold of me or follow us here on our YouTube channel.